Welcome back everybody. This is another episode of Sample Snippets. For those of you who are new here, then welcome. My name is Cherie and we talk mostly about perfume on this channel, but sometimes we talk about other stuff as well. This year in particular, I'm talking about perfume in the context of not buying perfume because I'm on a no buy for pretty much the entire year. So if you're interested in that, then stick around. I am doing sample snippets today. And if you're new here, then you may not know what Sample Snippets is. It is a video that I had always aspired to do monthly, which was basically me going through some samples that I have tried throughout the month, but that for whatever reason, I probably won't end up doing a full review on. Okay, so let's get started. I have about 6 samples. So what I do, because I've been sampling these things over several months, and to varying degrees, I might add, I tend to keep notes on my phone and I will refer to these, but I will also spray them on a strip so that I can smell them again and remind myself. Some of these I've only sampled fairly recently, so they're still quite fresh in my mind. Others are not so fresh and I will have to remind myself. And the first one is going to be one of those. The first one is called Into the Wild and it's by Maison Matine. And the perfumer behind this fragrance is Adelson Rato, who I'm not sure I'm really that familiar with. So my understanding with this house was that they wanted to release perfumes that weren't overly complicated, but that were just really pleasant to wear, but they're quite quirky as well. So if you see any of the artwork that they put out, it's all very bright and very colourful and a little bit quirky. So the opening is quite peppery and dry, and it's quite spicy and green. So it's very green, kind of herbaceous, and very light, sort of translucent. From memory, I think there is cardamom in this fragrance, but it doesn't really come across to me immediately as being cardamom or smelling the way I'm familiar with cardamom smelling in perfumes. But to me, it feels more herbaceous, almost plant-like, I guess. So it comes across as being very fresh. You know, sometimes cardamom comes off as being very sort of dried spice, very pungent and punchy. And whilst this does have a level of crispness to it, I don't feel like this fragrance quite goes that way. As I say, it just feels a little bit more herbaceous and leafy in a way. It's definitely green though. There is juniper berry in here, and for me, when fragrances have juniper berry in them, there's been a few fragrances over the years that have been released. I think there was one by Luban, and then Penhaligon's has juniper sling, and they all sort of come across as having that gin smell, you know, the gin and tonic kind of smell to them, which makes sense because gin is made from juniper berries. But this doesn't, the juniper berry in here doesn't lean that way. It doesn't smell like a drink. It doesn't smell like gin to me. It smells kind of sweet, although I wouldn't call this necessarily an overly sweet fragrance. It's more of a freshie. The juniper berry in here is really nice, actually. I really enjoy that note in this fragrance, if that is what I'm smelling, because I don't always get along with juniper berry, and I particularly don't always get along with it in the sense of I want to wear it on my body as a fragrance. I do detect, so the floral, I think one of the florals in here is magnolia, and it does have that very creamy, I don't want to say fleshy because that gives kind of a different connotation to me, but it does have a creaminess to it that has that floral note that is a little bit dulled down because of that creaminess. Does that make any sense? Like, it's not a very bright, fresh floral. It feels like it's been muddied up a little bit, but it's still very nice. It doesn't smell dirty or earthy or anything like that. There is a ginger note in here too, which isn't super noticeable, but it does give a bit of zing to it, that when you know that there's ginger in there, you sort of go, Oh yeah, that makes sense. And it has that little bit of heat to it as well. Now, the thing that really shocked me about this fragrance, so what I'm smelling now is not what I get in the dry down, and it certainly changes quite a bit on my skin. I can't remember from memory if it changes that much on the paper, but I do remember being really, really shocked after a couple of hours because there is a chocolate note in this fragrance. And when I read the notes and I had it on, you know, I'd spritzed it on and I was smelling it and I was thinking, there's no chocolate in here. I'm not getting any of that chocolate. Because it opens so fresh and green and zingy and creamy because of that magnolia. I couldn't really compute where the chocolate was going to fit in that arrangement. And it is true that it takes quite a while, for me at least, to detect the chocolate in here. So I think it needs time to really dry down for that super fresh opening to kind of settle in, the spiciness, the dry spices to take a bit of a back seat, and then you can kind of detect it. But even then, it's very subtle. That chocolate note, when it does come through, takes on more of just a light dusting. It's almost like it's just been lightly dusted with a little bit of that cocoa powder that's unsweetened. So it's got a little bit of a bitterness to it as well. And to be perfectly honest, if I hadn't read that it was a chocolate note, I wouldn't have picked it up as being chocolate or a chocolate note. I would have picked it out as being possibly more of a woody note because it has that dryness and then there's that dustiness, but it doesn't come across as being super chocolatey. For the most part, I think once the spiciness dries down, it just becomes this really beautiful, slightly creamy, juicy kind of fragrance that's very fresh. And then in the deep dry down, it just becomes this sort of nondescript, floral, creamy, woody, spicy base, which is very pleasant to wear. And even in the deep dry down in the final stages of this fragrance, I still feel like I get mostly magnolia as the floral. I don't feel like I get the other floral notes. I think there's frangipani in here too, which when I first read the note listing, I was quite excited about the prospect of that because growing up, frangipani is a flower that I was very familiar with, so I was wondering if it was going to take me back to my childhood, but it didn't really do that because again, I mostly get the magnolia. All in all, I really enjoyed this fragrance. I didn't feel it was overly complicated, but I do feel like it was really quite unique. Should I do the rating system? I feel like I want to do the rating system, but then it kind of feels weird because these are only samples. I'm going to do it. You guys seemed to like it last time, but don't hold me to it. If at some point in the future I might revisit some of these and change that, because again, some of these I have tested more than others and I reserve my right to change my mind. Okay, so the first rating was overall enjoyment of the perfume, and I'm gonna give it a 3.5 out of 5 for that because I did really enjoy it and I do think it's very wearable. I probably wouldn't lean towards it maybe in the dead of winter because it is quite light wearing and that translucent airy style. And I really liked that juniper berry aspect with the magnolia. I think that was a really great combo. Performance wise, it was pretty good for the first couple of hours. You could pretty easily smell it around you. But I did find that sort of around the 3-hour mark, if I wanted to be able to smell it easily on me, I wanted to respray it. These fragrances, I think, are intended for that sort of warmer weather wearing, and so they do tend to be a little bit lighter in composition. So I think, yeah, probably about 3 or 4 hours, you need to respray if you are so inclined. Or if you're like me, you might just put something else on to change it up a little bit. And then for number 3, the third rating is for uniqueness. I did think this had some really unique elements to it. I think the dry down probably becomes a little bit more sort of, I don't want to say generic, that sounds really bad, but I'd say the dry down was less outstanding to me than the opening in the mid. So I'm going to give it 4 stars. Next up is Oriental Velours, or is it Velour? Do you say the S? Anyway, by Les Indemodables. This is a Parisian brand. They've had quite a bit of airtime in the last couple of years. They've been quite popular. And the perfumer behind this one is Florence Fouillet-Dubois. When I first sampled this, I didn't look at the notes. I wanted to just... And I try and do that with most things, but sometimes it's hard because you naturally do get exposure to certain perfumes and what's in them and how they smell by, you know, nature of being on Instagram and sometimes even watching YouTube videos and stuff. So it's not always possible to go in with no idea. But with this one, I had no idea. I didn't know what it was going to be like. I didn't know what it was meant to be. Obviously, I figured it was meant to be some kind of amber perfume because it had Oriental in the title. But beyond that, I didn't really know where it sat in the scheme of things. There are some fragrances from Les Indemodables that are very popular and get a lot of airtime, and then there's others that I've just never heard of. So this is one that I did try. I sampled it 2 days ago, was the most recent wearing of this. So it's fairly new to me. I haven't sampled it extensively, not as much as the Maison Matine. But it's also fresher in my mind. And when I sampled it the other day, I also put it on my skin. I wasn't smelling it from a strip. In fact, I've never smelled it on a strip before. So this is the first time I'm smelling it on paper. And I'm getting the sense that it's a lot drier than I remember it being on my skin. So what did I say? Oh no, I did say it was dry. I said the first spritz was all about dry wood and peppery yet velvety amber. Already on the paper, I'm getting something like juniper or cypress. So here we go with the juniper again. And so juniper and cypress and pine all have something similar about them to me. When I smell juniper berries, there's something about juniper berries or a juniper note in perfumery that sometimes reminds me of the coldness of, say, the cypress or a pine note. And so I tend to lump them all together. And maybe it's because sometimes, I don't know, with juniper, if sometimes they use the plant and other times use the berries. I don't know. So I know I'm rambling, but in any case, I get something like juniper or cypress in here. It's that very cold and crisp and almost astringent, but not quite. So that's what I'm getting here. There's a coldness. And you know what? It's quite an interesting juxtaposition between that and the ambery tones in this fragrance, which, you know, amber is usually more, you know, resinous and warming. So it's kind of interesting to have that combo of the cold and the spicy and the warm. Although I think at the moment it's definitely leaning more cold. Whatever this is, and I can't remember if it was cypress or juniper. It might have been something else actually. Maybe it was pine. I don't think it's pine. But I do remember thinking, it's just dominating everything at the, you know, for the first probably half an hour or so. I did like this more as it dried down. I do remember that. I think the dry down became much more resinous and warm and smoother because you weren't getting sort of these cold, crisp elements with the ambery tones, but you also didn't have that really strong peppery bite to it. I think that all sort of settled down and melded in really nicely. On the strip now, even though I've only had it on here for probably 20 minutes, or maybe it's a bit longer, it might be half an hour, but I am actually getting quite a lot of myrrh now. So it's become quite resinous. There is a slightly smoky element to it. Yeah, I like this. I think I struggle with the thought of where I would wear it because it does get more smoky and resinous in the dry down, and I don't mind smoky resinous fragrances, but there's only so, I think I already have a couple that kind of lean in that direction, and I don't think I need more of that because particularly where I live and the climate that I live in, I'm really only going to wear those sorts of fragrances in the dead of winter, and even then our winters don't last that long. So it's very nice. I really liked it. I loved how it developed, and I loved how there were a few different contrasts in here. I don't know personally where I would wear it. I'd love to smell it on somebody else. And you know what? This is one of those ones where if I could get a candle that smelled like this, it would be fantastic, because you have that, you know, those cypressy, coniferous sort of notes that are really crisp and clean and fresh. So it'd be very refreshing in a room. But then you have also that more dense base with the resins and the ambery tones. So it would give you that sort of more cozy, comforting feel. So what am I going to give it? So for overall enjoyment of the scent, I think I'm going to give it a 2.5, only because for me personally, I'm not a huge fan of those cypressy, junipery, coniferous kind of notes all the time. And it is quite strong in the opening. Those notes very much dominate the fragrance in the opening. So that's the only reason. If you really like those sorts of notes and want to have more of them, then this is probably going to be the opposite for you. You're probably going to love it. Rating number 2 is performance. Excellent performance on these. I mean, even just spraying from a sample vial, it lasted all day. So, and also possibly because it does have an ambery base, so it is going to have a little bit more body and longevity to it. But yeah, I think I've very easily got, you know, 6-7 hours of being able to smell it quite easily, and then it died down, you know, to more of a skin scent after that. But you could still detect it pretty easily even up until I pretty much went to bed that evening. Also, I washed my hands a few times during the day, and I did spritz it on the back of my hand. That didn't seem to affect it. I could still smell it. So I would say I'll give it a 4 out of 5 for performance. Oh, and then for uniqueness, I definitely feel like that opening is quite interesting and quite different. Even in the mid, when it's starting to transition from being like more cooler tones to more warmer, spicier, smoother tones. I think that was quite interesting. I think the dry down is still quite interesting, because I think that the dry down was something that was more familiar to me, which is possibly why I liked the dry down more as well, because I was familiar with it. You know, that myrrhy, resinous, ambery base. So for uniqueness, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 as well. Next up is one that I really enjoy, and I actually have it on today because they've just got listed on Fragrantica, which is very exciting for them, and I wanted to start wearing the samples again so I could put a little review in to just, you know, give them a bit of a leg up. This is called, this sample is Slow World by Chasing Scents. This is the little indie Sydney perfumer that I have been talking about on and off on a few different videos recently. I bought a bottle of their Weeping Rose, which I really, really like. This one is really interesting. When I first tried it, was in the height of summer, and I remember thinking, oh, it's too much, too much. But now it's cooling down, you know, I've got my long sleeve top on, it's cooling down here, we're in autumn. And I put it on my hand today. In fact, I put it on a couple of weeks ago as well. And then I put it on the back of my hand today, and I was just going, oh, this is so nice. So this is clearly going to be a cold weather scent for me, I think. It's very interesting. So it comes off, and I don't even know what the notes are, but I will, again, for all of these, I'll try and remember to put the notes on the screen, because I'm really bad at doing that. I just tell you what I think it smells like, and then I don't necessarily back that up with the factual notes. So I'm going to try and do better on that. So this one is definitely a very ambery kind of fragrance. But see, the premise of Chasing Scents, the perfumer for Chasing Scents is Sandy Wong. The whole premise of their line mostly is it's all based around tea, because she loves tea. And so a lot of their fragrances are very much based around tea notes. This is the most interesting, actually, you know, there is another fragrance that doesn't smell like this, but there's another fragrance that is a tea fragrance that I remember thinking when I first smelled it, that I didn't think it was a tea fragrance. And that was Tears and Dew by Frasai. So similar thing here. This is a very gourmand almost, well, I think it is meant to be a gourmand or gourmand leaning type of fragrance. It's very spicy, it's very warming and sweet. It's got quite a lot of sweetness to it. In fact, after, this has been on my hand for a few hours now. In fact, I might spray it on a strip because it is quite different in the opening. And there is something that happens to it during the wear after a couple of hours, and you just go, wow. Oh yeah, okay. It's so interesting. So it's going to be really hard for me to describe it because there are notes in this fragrance that I've never smelled in real life. So I don't know what it is that I'm smelling. But this smells, and I am probably also being influenced by the fact that they sent me a sample of some earlier versions of some of their fragrances. And I think this is completely different to the other one that they sent me. But the other one that they sent me did have some similarities to this. It was very gourmand leaning. It was quite spicy. And the color of the juice was bright red. And they didn't put any coloring in it, I don't think. Well, it was only a mod, so why would they bother putting color in it? I think it was just the color of the plant material that they used. So there's a note in here called dragon's blood, or they call it dragon's blood. I think the plant is called dragon's blood. And I think I looked it up, and I think I read that the plant sort of bleeds red if you cut it or something. I don't know, am I totally making this up now? It was so long ago. It was probably 2 years ago now, so I feel like I might be embellishing the truth a little or making things up without meaning to. But I do remember looking it up and going, wow, that sounds really cool. Google dragon's blood, okay? It's an actual thing, it's a thing. Okay, so I'm getting off track. So this smells, it has a really unique scent to it. But anyway, I think where I was going, sorry, I'm all over the place, but where I was going was that to me, this smells red, like it's sort of like it has an element, it reminds me a little bit of red tea, but it doesn't smell like tea, at least not in the opening. Or maybe it does a little bit, but it does kind of smell red. And again, spicy. I feel, and what spices am I getting? I don't know, I feel like I get maybe nutmeg. I think in the earlier version, I'm getting confused now, but I think the earlier version, I think I sort of picked up on something like clove or something. But, oh, you know what? I have a card here somewhere that has all of the stuff on it. Okay, I don't know if this is going to help me at all. It's got no, oh, okay. Okay, this is starting to make sense now. It still does smell like a little bit like nutmeg to me, but it's not as bitter as nutmeg. But there's no nutmeg listed here. What is listed is pu'er tea, I don't know how to pronounce it. I've never had that, never smelled it, don't know what it's like. Saffron, dragon's blood resin, so it's a resin, malt, sandalwood, vanilla bean, and incense. And you do get a lot of that vanilla, so that it is quite sweet. So if you're a gourmand lover, very good chance you might like this, although it is quite dark, quite heavy. Oh, it's actually not that heavy. It's not heavy, but it's got quite a bit of body to it. But it's a lot darker than you would expect a tea scent to be, put it that way. But then what happens that I was alluding to earlier is that a couple of hours in, suddenly it changes. And to me, it felt like I was smelling coffee, but a really sort of rich, sweetened coffee. And I think that might be the malt, but it smells very coffee-like to me, which is interesting or funny if you think about it, because it's a tea fragrance and I'm smelling coffee. And even when I'm smelling a perfume that actually has coffee in it, I usually never smell coffee, or if I do, it's very fleeting. So, but this is not fleeting, this sticks around. So if you've been looking for a scent that has a really strong coffee vibe, this might fit that bill, although you might not think this smells like coffee. It's malt. It's obviously the malt note that's doing that to me. And then you got the saffron on top of that. Although the saffron, I do get it, but if you're a bit scared of saffron notes in perfumes, I wouldn't shy away from trying this just on that basis, because I know saffron can be quite medicinal and it can be quite polarizing in perfume, but this is done beautifully. I really like this, and I've been on the fence as to whether or not at the end of the year when I'm off my no-buy and I've finished this sample, although I'm well over halfway through this sample already, as to whether I might buy a bottle. But it's so, I don't know, it's not something I could wear every day, but it's definitely sort of your nighttime or possibly cooler weather kind of scent. But then I know some of you like to wear the big heavy hitters in the warmer months. So totally, you know, horses for courses. I really like it. Very interesting. I just love Sandy's work. I think she's a magician, particularly with tea notes. And again, you know, I bought Weeping Rose. I thought that was beautiful. This is really nice. I also really love Tea Service, which I'm not talking about today, but suffice to say, I really enjoy wearing this and I'm absolutely loving this sample. Okay, so what am I going to rate it? Overall enjoyment. Well, a big smile on my face, I think you can tell. I think overall enjoyment, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Again, giving it some leeway because this is not something that I could approach every day. So it's not that level of enjoyment, but I do very, very much enjoy this fragrance. What was the next one? Performance. Thumbs up on the performance. If I was to do a full wear, so far when I've sampled it, when I've been wearing this, I'm trying to save it, you know, so I'm only like doing a little spritz on the back of my hand. I'm not doing an all over spritz, but I do feel like this would have really great longevity if you were to do that. I would say you probably get a good maybe 3 or 4 hours of being able to smell it around you, possibly more, and then, you know, it'll be sort of dying down to be a little bit more intimate after that. But then, you know, I'd still think you'd easily be able to smell it on your skin without too much trouble, without having to, you know, bury your nose in your skin, well up to probably the 12-hour mark. So I will give this, again, a 4 out of 5. I feel like that's going to be really hard to edit because I was all over the place. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. I'll make this one a little bit shorter, okay? I won't ramble on so much. This one is, I've got a decant of this. My friend Chrissy and I exchanged decants. I bought Jayne from this line. So this is Ormonde Jayne, this is Tanger. I bought Jayne and she bought Tanger, and then we swapped decants because we both kind of liked the other one when we sampled them as well, but we, you know, I gravitated towards the Jayne and she gravitated towards this one, which I wasn't sure about this one because it is very sweet, so I wasn't sure whether I wanted, you know, a full bottle of it or not. And the reason why I ended up pulling this one out, and I'm talking about it now, is because then Margie, thanks Margie for all of your support. She's always commenting on my videos. Thank you, Margie. She asked me about this, and so I had pulled it out one day and I decided to wear it so that I could, yeah, I gave her some thoughts and then I'm thinking, I'm kind of working off memory here. Let's actually put it on. So I did, and then I've kind of been wearing it. I've worn it a little bit. So this is like straight off the bat, it's just really sweet. And you know, the whole line, this was the La Route de Soie or whatever it's called, the Silk Route line, which was all mostly very sweet. And this one possibly from memory might have been the actual sweetest of the lot. That and the rose one, I can't remember, Damask Rose, that was very sweet as well from memory. The others, there were other ones that were sweet, like by Byzance was very sweet. It was sweet, but it was more airy. This is more dense. It's sort of very sweet, but there's also a creaminess to it, and there is a bit of a greenness to it as well in the opening. I think there is neroli in this, or I think neroli might be one of the main notes, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. You know, neroli has that aspect to it where it has almost a soapy vibe. And so this one is kind of treading a very fine line between being sweet gourmand and soapy. And can they be both at the same time? It's quite orangey. I want to spray it on me, but I can't. I don't have any skin. Anyway, yeah, I do. Here we go. And what I get in the opening is there's a creaminess. It's very sweet and there is an oranginess to it, but it's not, it's a very sweet orangey scent. And I don't think there's orange in it, but I think from memory there's mandarin, and that's where I'm assuming. Well, it's basically an orange, right? I think that's what I was getting from that. The sweetness in here is really quite strong. So if you really don't like vanilla, or if you really don't like sweet, then this is almost toothacheingly sweet to me. But I think in the dry down, what I get, I think the dry down is what got me, because when I sampled this, Chrissy and I were on a, like we were doing some kind of seminar where Linda Pilkington dialed in, and she sort of gave us the overview. And I remember spritzing this one on thinking, oh, it's way too sweet. But then later I smelled it and I was thinking, wow, that smells great. And the reason is because I think in the dry down you get more of these green neroli, woody neroli type notes with, what am I thinking of? Mossy notes. So, and I think there's a resin or something in here as well, but basically it's an ambery base. So it's very sweet. It's not super heavy though. There is a denseness to it, because I think, especially in the opening, you've got that creaminess of I think it's a ylang ylang in the opening. So that gives it a bit of fleshiness. But then as it dries down and you get more of the neroli, there's more woody aspects, more green aspects. The mossy notes start to come out as well. I don't know. I mean, I think the dry down for me is definitely the sweet spot. Haha, see what I did there? Anyway, the opening is not my favorite. I mean, I like the opening if I really am in the mood for something like just toothacheingly sweet, because that's basically what it is to me, at least. But I do like that orange or that mandarin note, because it's really juicy and sweet and lovely. It's not like oil. It's not like orange oil, which is a bit darker and denser and heavier and almost pithy, you know. No, this is much sweeter. This is much brighter and sparklier. But again, you've got that creaminess in the opening that kind of weighs it down a little bit, which stops it from being, you know, effervescent in a way. So I really enjoy this. I'm glad I have the decant, but I'm also glad I didn't buy the bottle, because Jayne is definitely the winner for me out of that line. I just love that fragrance. Whereas this one, clearly I've explained that I'm not a huge fan of the opening, but I really do like the dry down. On that note, I'll get into the rating system, shall I? So the overall enjoyment, I think I'll give this a 3.5 out of 5. Just because I'm definitely on the yes, I like it side of the spectrum, but I don't necessarily love every element of it. Performance, I would say it's pretty good. I think it lasts quite a while. I'd say moderate, so let's say, again, I'll give it a 3.5. I don't think it lasts super long, and I think it does die down to a skin scent after a few hours. I don't think it's a huge projector or anything like that, if you care about that sort of thing. Although, having said that, I spritzed one little spray on my arm and whoo, it's everywhere. Okay, so 3.5 out of 5 for performance, maybe edging up to 4 based on my immediate experience. And 5 is uniqueness of scent. Well, I do think it's unique, but I do feel like that opening is more like orange creamsicle, even though I've never smelled an orange creamsicle. I know, I just haven't lived, obviously. So maybe I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Maybe it possibly deserves more than that, but I'm sticking with my 3. Next up is this lovely little sample of Rose Goldea Blossom Delight by Bvlgari. I think if you've watched my other videos where I do talk about Rose Essentielle, which was a Bvlgari fragrance I had many years ago, and then bought a new bottle in recent times just as it was being discontinued, or possibly a while after it had been discontinued, and I was a bit disappointed because it wasn't the same as previous experiences with that fragrance had been. I really enjoyed this little sample. So this I picked up, I just reviewed Musk Noir Rose by Narciso. On the same trip where I picked up that sample in the department store, I was given this one, which I'm very glad that they gave it to me because I really enjoy wearing this one. This is a really bright, fresh rose. It smells very clean and slightly musky, probably like many other fresh rose musky designer scents that you've smelled over the years. I would say in the opening, the musk note is maybe a tad sharp, but it's not enough to be headache inducing for me, which I'm quite sensitive to with musks, especially those really sharp, clean type musks that a lot of designer scents have in them. Yeah, usually I try and steer away from those, but this one was okay. It actually, when I first sprayed this on, I just went straight on skin. I figured I would, even if I wasn't going to love it, I didn't necessarily think I was going to hate it either, and I didn't. I absolutely did not. When I first sprayed this on, my immediate thought was, oh, it kind of smells similar to Delina La Rosée. But it doesn't, because I sprayed Delina La Rosée on the other hand to do a side-by-side comparison, and the Delina La Rosée is definitely more juicier, more sweeter, and it also has that slight aquatic tone, which the more I wear that fragrance, the more that is starting to jump out at me, and I'm worried, I'm very, very worried that in the not too distant future, it's going to get to the point where it's going to bother me. But I think the trick for me on that one is not to wear too much of it. But anyway, the Goldea Rose Goldea Blossom Delight is definitely more rose musky leaning rather than rose fruity leaning. It possibly is a little bit more musky than rosy, but it's very light, very fresh, and very pretty. There are other floral notes in here as well. So whilst the opening is more rose, I think, it definitely, as it dries down, I think you get more of a generic floral vibe happening rather than it being, you know, very super rosy. This is just a really easy wearing, pretty rosy floral fragrance. And weirdly, I'm kind of drawn to wanting to buy it. At the same time, I know I don't really need it because it's kind of redundant in light of La Rosée and Velours and Stella, you know, all of which I own. So I don't really need this one, but there's something about this that I want it, you know, maybe. And I think where I was getting to with that is I think it maybe, I don't know, it doesn't smell like Rose Essentielle. It definitely doesn't. That was a very unique, I mean, that had a very distinct scent. This doesn't smell like that. But maybe my heartstrings are tugging towards this one because, you know, I really had a massive love affair with Bvlgari fragrances in my 20s and 30s. You know, I had lots of their fragrances, and for a long time, that was all I wore was Bvlgari fragrances. There was something about them that I really gravitated towards. And now that I say that, I'm kind of laughing at myself because earlier in this video, I said that I don't really like tea scents that much. Yet most of the Bvlgari fragrances are tea scents. Anyway, you see how hard this is? I don't know if I have much more to say about this. It's very pretty. I really enjoy wearing it. I've still got half the sample left, so I'm very pleased about that. But I probably won't be buying it. So, rating system, overall enjoyment. Clearly, I really enjoyed this fragrance. So I'm going to give it look, I don't think I'm going to give it a 4. I'll give it a 3.5. Maybe it does deserve a 4. You know, look, I think the reason I don't want to give it a 4 is because I'm being a bit of a perfume snob. So no, I'm going to give it a 4 because I really enjoyed wearing this. It's just so pretty and airy and light and nice. Performance-wise, not great. I do believe, you know, I was struggling to sort of get 4 hours out of this. So yeah, probably a 2. And then what's the last one? Uniqueness. I don't think this is unique at all. I think we've probably smelled some version of this a bazillion times, but I just think that this is done well. So I'm going to give it a 2 for uniqueness. So I feel really bad because I rated it so low, but yet I really, really enjoyed this one. And out of all of these, this is probably the one that I'd be most likely to buy at the end of the year. Anyway. So this is complete opposite end of the spectrum to the one that I just told you about. So this is totally opposite to the Bvlgari fragrance. This is a sample of Sotto La Luna Tuberose by Andy Tower. This came out in 2015, so it's been around for a while, but I get the feeling that any of you who haven't smelled this yet, if you were to go out and smell it, particularly in light of what I just said about the Bvlgari fragrance, if you were to go out and smell this one, you'd be going, Cherie, WTF, what are you talking about? And what the hell were you thinking? So I'm not recommending this, okay? Actually, none of these are recommendations. These are just my thoughts. You can make your own minds up. This has had some very terrible reviews over the years. I think Kafkaesque, which is one of my favorite perfume blogs to read, just totally dissed this. Like, they just didn't enjoy it at all. There's a Gardenia one as well, apparently, and I think they're both very much along the same line, so they both pretty much just got hammered. Anyway, so over the years, this has had some very bad feedback. People just either, if you like this fragrance, I think the people who like this fragrance have just been very quietly in the corner enjoying their fragrance, but not telling anyone about it, because it's been really hard to find any positive feedback on this perfume. That said, when I first tried this perfume, I also very much disliked it. This came in a sample set that I bought several years ago now. And it wasn't at all what I was expecting. But like most Andy Tower fragrances, my nose needs time, my brain needs time to adjust. It needs time to understand and recognize these fragrances for what they are, not what I want them to be, or not what I had predisposed conceptions of what they would be. And for this one, because it had tuberose in the title, I was thinking I was going to get a beautiful white floral fragrance. That is not what this is. There is tuberose in it, but it's not a tuberose as you would know tuberose to be. It's not fresh green tuberose, it's not watery tuberose, and it's not indolic tuberose. It's none of those. It's very different. And you know, L'air du Desert Marocain was also a prime example of that. When I first sampled that, I remember having a conversation with somebody on Instagram about that when I first smelled it, thinking, I don't know what the big deal is. You know, this has been hyped up to the max and I just didn't get it. And then 2 years later, I randomly ended up wearing it again and I fell in love with it. And I think part of the reason why I had so much trouble with that one at first was because I had read that it was an ambery fragrance, and I had it in my head that it was going to be a pretty amber, you know, what I term to be a pretty amber, you know, a little bit sweet, kind of cozy and fluffy and warm. It's definitely warm, but it's none of those things. L'air du Desert Marocain is dry and dusty, and it's not sweet at all, and it's representative of the desert, which is not what normal ambers, or what I had at that stage understood ambers to be. That's not what it was. And similarly, this tuberose doesn't smell like a normal tuberose. What this smells like is earth and burnt spices and green spices, maybe a bit of old leather, mushrooms, and old dusty attic. And then somewhere buried under that is just like the slightest hint of tuberose. It sounds terrible, but it's also really fabulous. And I will say that all those years ago when I got that discovery set, of all the samples that were in there, this was the one I had the highest hopes for, and this one was the one that disappointed me the most. I mean, I really, at least with L'air du Desert Marocain, I didn't love it, but I didn't dislike it. But I think originally I quite disliked this one. So anyway, I've done a complete 180 on this fragrance, and I don't know how I ended up pulling this out a few weeks ago, but I did, and I started wearing it and I was really just totally vibing with it. And then we were I think I wore it the day before we flew out on our holiday. And I remembered thinking on the day we were flying out on our holiday that I wanted to wear this again. And then I thought, no, I can't do that. I'm getting on a plane and I can't do that to the people around me because I don't think that other people would appreciate this smell as much as I do. But I did wear it while we were trekking, and I really enjoyed it for that because it is, again, it's quite earthy, so it went well with the surroundings, and because it does project quite a bit too, I didn't feel too bad because we were out in the open. So, but I am a little bit sad because I have sneakily looked this up to see if it's still available, and I don't know if it's been discontinued as such, but at least in Australia I could only find one bottle on one website. And you know, I guess doing the math, I figure that by the time my no-buy finishes, that may not still be the case. Like there might not be any available in Australia by then. So I'm a little bit sad, but at the same time, you know, this is quite a polarizing fragrance. It's a very unique smell, and a lot of people really dislike it. I'm in love with this fragrance at the moment. But given that I've done a complete 180, I kind of think there's every chance that this little bubble of me totally adoring this fragrance is going to go away just as quickly as it popped up. So anyway, so that is Sotto La Luna Tuberose by Andy Tower, in case you happen to have come across it and were wondering what it smelled like. So rating system, enjoyment factor, well, at the moment it's through the roof. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5. But beware, it's very polarizing, and I probably would have given it a 0 out of 5 a few years ago, so just keep that in mind. It's all swings and roundabouts here. Performance, I would say I would give this a 4.5 out of 5 because it lasts forever. It lasts forever. If you haven't tried it and you're going to try this, then be warned. If you don't like it, which is very possible because you probably won't like it when you first smell it, don't put it on your skin. Put it on a piece of paper, because if you put it straight on your skin, just beware, you're going to be stuck with it for a while. And you're going to be smelling it, and people around you are going to be smelling it. So what did I give that? I think it's, yeah, 4.5 out of 5 for sure. And then uniqueness. Oh yeah, it's unique, okay? 5 out of 5. That's an easy one. All right, well, that turned out to be not sample snippets. That turned out to be 6 full reviews of 6 different perfumes. So pretty much. So I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you've been sampling in the comments below. I'm really curious. If you have tried any of these, do let me know. Particularly if you've tried the Andy Tower, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, just because my own opinion has changed so drastically with that one that I still can't get my head around it. I strongly disliked this, and now I really love it. But I don't know for how long, because obviously my nose is fickle. I don't know, I just love it. Anyway, so if you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up. That would be very, very much appreciated. And I will see you in the next one.